Trevor Harrison. Welcome to the show.
So good to be here, Kino.
How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Busy as usual with doing lots of writing and lots of interviews the last little while, but it's all fun and it's all good.
It's part of the journey, right? I was actually chatting about this on yesterday's show. Well, not yesterday, it was the day before. The similarities between the book industry and the music industry once again, because
Mhm.
the moment you have a song out or you have a book out, after that comes the touring, you know, the book tours or concerts, it comes the PR campaigns, radio interviews, podcasts, and that goes on for a while,
Yeah.
promote, your career, to promote your book, like never stops, right?
And it is an exciting part of it. I mean, the production of, again, music, as you say, any kind of art or writing takes a long time, but you want to get it out there. You want people to actually read or listen to it. And so that has to be part of your career, your job. But one of the things I've been thinking about is how really it's changed over time too. I have an academic background. I've published, written a lot of things. It used to be, you'd publish a book and you'd have a book launch and you might go to a conference. Uh, it's changed totally in the last 15, 20 years. Now there's, thankfully, through people like yourself, podcasts and interviews. I did an interview last week with people in Barcelona. This is not something that 20 years ago people were doing, but it just shows how technology and the world has come together. It's a very exciting time actually to be an author.
Yeah, how we can all connect with each other no matter which corner of the world we're in. You
Yeah.
know, I think the best experience I got with that was it's on one of my other shows, and we had a guest from Australia. And the co host for that show is based in the US in Oregon. So
Mhm.
it was Saturday evening for me, 11 p.m. For my co-host, it was 8:30, 9 a.m. for her. For our guest in Australia, it was already Sunday, 8 a.m. in the morning. And here we are all connecting on this podcast.
Yeah. No,
Crazy.
it suddenly becomes a much smaller world than we realize. It's just you need to wake yourself up with coffee at 4 in the morning though to talk to someone or something.
But as you said, it is exciting.
It is
One of the
very
things.
exciting.
Yeah.
Years ago, I used to when I would do a presentation someplace, and I would say to people afterwards that yeah, I know what I'm going to say. The most exciting part of the presentation is actually the questions afterwards, because I don't know what people are going to ask, and that gets my creative juices going. The fact that I have to answer something that I didn't think about. So, and it's much the same with this doing some of these podcasts, these interviews is like, oh, okay, I didn't expect that, but what an interesting question. And yeah, no, my brain has to think again.
Yeah. And I love those type of shows. I mean, even with me, it's like organic, original, 100% spontaneous.
Yeah.
I get some guests who will be like, can you send me like the questions beforehand? Can you let me
Yeah.
know what we're going to talk about? And I respond to them and I say it's not how I go about, on my how I go about it on my show. I want to keep it for spontaneous. As you said, the creative juices. Let me ask a question that you wasn't expecting
Yeah.
and it also builds a good relationship with the audience, because now we're living in this era where human connection is so important, and people, including myself, want to build like intimate relationships
Yeah.
with creatives all over. So in order for us to do that, we have to keep it real with each other, nothing
Yeah.
premeditated.
No, it's kind of like, I mean, you imagine you want to sit down with a friend over beer or something, and so you've sat down with an agenda beforehand. That's kind of weird. So I mean, convert, and this should be like a conversation with somebody. You're getting to know them. It's a friend that you're going to make over time. and it should be as spontaneous as you say, and you don't quite know beforehand where the conversation's going to go. Now, of course, what we're supposed to do here, because publishers love this, I'm supposed to hold up my book. So okay, here's the book, go out there, everybody, buy this book, it's great, you'll love it. But now we can have the conversation.
Yeah, we'll get into that, a bit later. I'll get into that. So, Trevor, you coming to us from Canada, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, coming to us from Canada. You another shadow powerhouse author. Yeah, how's Edward doing?
I think it's been really interesting getting to know Ed as well. It's almost again a weird kind of connection thing. Here I have this book that I've written, or I think there's a book there. I send off this manuscript to Ed, and all of a sudden we're connecting around this, and he agrees. He says, "Yeah, I think there's a book here," and then back and forth, and fairly quickly actually we come out with this book, and Ed's been great to work with. The publishing house has been fabulous, and of course. Through Ed, getting to know Mickey Mickelson, who's been doing a lot of the publicity stuff. Mickey's been fabulous too. So on this journey, it's just been a really nice journey meeting people like Ed and Mickey, and now yourself and others. Uh, Great experience.
Yeah, to have because I will label you as an independent author, even though you with Shadowpaw. But it's so good to have a good team, you know. And I mean, if you look at Ed and you look at Mickey, you got a phenomenal team. They're amazing people, great
Yeah.
guys, you know.
And over the years I've published with fairly big academic presses and everything, but and they're big. I mean, and you got any number of people who are doing all kinds of stuff. I don't know how many different editors. This has been a much more personal and interesting experience than some of the publications I've done with major academic presses in the past. It just feels much more natural and convivial, if I can put it that way.
It's like you feel yourself, you know.
Yeah, it's the responsiveness back and forth between editor, publisher, and the writer. It's a nice environment. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Sorry, did you hear that car in the background?
I did. It's a very powerful car from the engine.
Yeah, doesn't happen too often. I'm not sure whether I should edit this part out by me asking you that question. It's like a LOL moment for us here. Doesn't
Well,
happen a lot, but here we are.
from the sound of it, it's a high-powered sports car of some sort of the type I don't own.
Yeah, here's a spontaneous moment for the show. And I don't know why they do that. I honestly don't know why they do. Like, what do they get out of it? I think to myself, like, what are you getting out of this? But maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. I don't know.
It's an ego thing for some people. They just love to hear the car go. Of course, one of the things now with as we move to electric cars, and I've heard this actually. So electric cars actually won't have any sound. That's the glory of them. They're very smooth. But some people are actually starting to attach the sound of an old engine to it just so they love the sound of this, gasoline engine. But electric cars don't have that. So
Yeah,
we'll lose
yeah.
that.
Well, apologies for the car.
No problem. No problem.
If I look at, say, even before my early 20s, okay, let's just say when I was in high school, right? Like, I'm, fast cars, like all these fancy sound, in all the cars, it should be like, okay, yeah, that's cool. But now in 2025, it's like just overrated. My opinion.
Yeah, I think so. It's like changes in tastes in music or something. A lot of there's something about those gas guzzling engines. They sound powerful, and so I think especially for young men, they love the sense of power around those things. But as you get older, it's kind of like, been there, done that. I'm past it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the thing is, like, where this car is driving, it's not like even close to where I am. It's like 2 streets away. I mean, that's how
Yeah.
loud it is. And this road is a private road, you know? So it's probably someone that doesn't even stay here. But, anyway. Anyway.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. So, Trevor, I would love to start here first, me getting to know you. You're a retired professor of sociology. You a world traveler in the 1970s and 1980s. Now you were turned author. Now, when I look at sociology, I see it as analytical. When I look at writing or storytelling, I see it as creative. So let's start with, connecting the dots from ending off, with like what inspired you to transition from analytical. I know you've already mentioned that you did write, prior to your book, and
Mhm.
also what inspired you from analytical to creative.
Yeah, I had actually kind of an interesting academic career, and before that, well, to back up, so when I was in my teens, I would write a lot of things just in my spare time, poetry, short stories. Always thought I would be actually a kind of a literary writer, poet. Uh, but then in my 20s, I started traveling a fair amount. I traveled through the Middle East. I traveled through the States, hitchhiking around. In fact, I have a book shortly coming out actually about my trip along the hippie trail back in the mid 70s. And that will be coming out through an academic press, but it includes a lot of notes I took at that time, and I kept very good notes actually of traveling through places like Afghanistan and Iran and all over. Anyway, so out of that experience, eventually I went to university, and as you said, it's a little bit different environment. But even while I was doing my academic stuff, would break it up by traveling places, doing other things, continued to think about writing in a literary way. So even some of my academic press has involved literary touches, if I can put it that way, so that I always tried to write academic things that were accessible to people, not heavy on the academic jargon. And I was pretty successful doing that. Well, coming out of then finally retiring, I went back to some of the notes and things that I'd written before. And I've started writing poetry again. I have a couple of poetry books coming out fairly shortly. And when I started to look back on some of my notes, I thought, well, I think there's books here. And one of them was this book, Tales This Side of the Elysian Fields, which were a whole series of notes I had taken in my 20s when traveling around, hitchhiking, working at jobs that were interesting but not a lot of fun. And it was out of that I said, I think actually some of these notes and my memories make for a really interesting book here. So for me, it's almost like two different careers here. I've had a fairly successful academic career, which, like I said, I still kept in the back of my mind, writing in a way that was interesting for people. And now I'm on to a second career, going back, writing about memories, etc., of different places, and doing literary writing again. Uh, I'm in terms of traveling, I'm actually off to Vietnam here in a few days, a second trip in the last year, and I'm going to be probably keeping good notes of that. But and I've started writing, doing some creative fictional short stories as well. So it's almost like I have two careers here, and I've slipped from my academic one into this very interesting world of literary writers, poets, and everything. Fascinating time for me, I have to say. Keeps the juices going.
I got to ask, which one do you love most?
Oh, I really enjoyed my academic time. I enjoyed the teaching, all of the stuff, the conferences. But where I'm at right now is also really exciting. It is a different creative part of myself, and so it's hard to pick. And in some ways, they still go together. So even when I'm wrote this recent book, the there's parts in there where I talk about traveling, being in Spain back in the early 70s when Francisco Franco, the dictator, was still in charge in Spain. And so it's a personal monologue about my trip at that time, but I also insert things about so that the reader knows it's not just about me. I'm talking about here's how scary it actually was to see the Guardia Civil, the people, the soldiers with guns as I walk around. And so there's a little bit of analysis of the context of what it's like to be in a place that is a dictatorship, even as you're a backpacking, quotes, hippie. So I think, successfully blend both of them so that uh, I have to tell you, if I was to write just simply about traveling to a resort, I'd find it really boring. And I think my readers would find it boring. So, for me, travel and being in places is getting to know people, knowing their stories, but also knowing their stories in the context of what is going on there politically, culturally, economically. When I go to Vietnam in a few days here, right now there's a terrible typhoon is hitting that country. I can't very well be in the country and just see interesting sights and not
Mm.
comment and know about the fact that this is really hitting people very hard. This is where they live. I'm privileged as a traveler to go there, but other people are actually having to live through this. So I don't separate myself and my stories too much from the reality of the people that I'm going to be associating with.
100%, 100%. When you were talking about your academic press, was this now around sociology or the different topics?
Yeah, a lot of it. My sociology was always very political, so I'm a political sociologist and also a political economist. So, in fact, I used to tell my students all the time when they would take the first day of courses with me, I'd say, "Well, you're going to get sociology, but you're going to get a lot of economics, politics, history, culture." Because that to me is sociology. It's like the whole ball of wax, right? We're going to talk about everything that goes into understanding what's going on here. So yeah, a lot of my stuff though was I've written about Greece, I've written about Spain, I've written about the United States a lot, and I've certainly written a lot about Canada. Years ago, actually, I was very privileged to be in Japan for 4 months on an exchange, and out of that fascinating time in Japan, I came back from there and immediately put out a book on Japan out of the 4 months there. And it was, again, just to show kind of the way I approach things, bit of history there so people could understand Japan and its formation over 200 years. But there's also things like my observations traveling around and going to various places, festivals, etc. Even going to love hotels, which is a thing actually in Japan. But I also included a bunch of haiku poems that I wrote while I was there. So it's got kind of poetry, it's got observational stuff, it's got analytical stuff about Japan's history and politics. And anyway, so it was kind of a grab bag, and people who read it said, wow, they were really interested in this book that was just full of a whole bunch of stuff. And again, that's
Yeah.
how I sort of approach my writing and I guess my career.
Wow. 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 So, you know, being involved in different eras, from the 70s, visiting all these countries, experiencing dictatorship, you know, when you look at the world today, what social changes politically do you find fascinating and what do you find concerning?
Yeah, lots of concerning things, although, sometimes we can over exaggerate what's going on. We are in a very troubled time, kind of, I think, the rise of right wing quasi or fully fascist movements and dictators. But we have to remember we're in some pretty scary times in the late 60s and early 70s. The Vietnam War was still going on. There was assassinations going on. It was pretty scary then. Uh, One of the things actually, biggest impacts I think is the change, the new technologies around social media and everything else.
Yeah,
And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I think, because on one level it can connect us, as we're seeing right now, the two of us having this conversation, but it also has the capacity to divide us because there's a lot of misinformation, and people sometimes get tied into their own little informational silo, and all they hear is kind of the echo chamber of things from certain quarters. And so, we'd be a better world if we actually listened to more voices of people in different parts of the world, and we didn't start to judge things by very shallow stereotypes. So that's the biggest thing going on. And I think that some of our problems are because nefarious leaderships in various places are playing on the fears, the anxieties, and the stereotypes that people have about people out there. So people become more fearful and more angry about things than they should be. And one way to break around that is to read widely, to be aware of different media, but it is still actually to travel. When you travel to different places, you start to realize there's more that connects us than actually divides us in this world. That
Mm.
people are people everywhere, and they are fascinating and have their own wonderful stories to tell.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you, your view on how social media and technology is transforming, human relationships, connection, and communities. But, you answered it, and you shared your concern. For me, it's like we're living in a world, and this is global, where what comes out of our mouth is based on emotions and feelings rather
Mhm.
than pragmatic, logical thinking.
Yeah.
And that's how, politicians are getting it right, is because they're playing on people's emotions. What about
I
you?
agree.
And
Yeah. No, I agree fully. We are, one of the things we know about human beings is that we respond differently to, say, visuals than we do to the written word. And so, there is that part of me as an academic, and the written word and words, period, are still really important because it's only through language that we can begin to kind of understand what's going on out there. When we respond viscerally to images, and it's very easy for politicians to throw up images that are going to incite you, uh, then I think that's the real danger of the new media. So we need to be more literate, and frankly, we even as we go to things like YouTube and television and whatnot, we need to still concentrate on reading. We need to concentrate on the word, and that's where I think all authors come in. Authors are fundamentally interested in the word and the right word. What is the word do you actually want that tells your story best?
yeah, yeah. It's an ambitious goal, right? It's an ambitious goal, you know, to get people, as you said, to actually read, to actually think outside the box, think outside their borders, explore different cultures, learn about different cultures, even if you don't have the financial means to visit Japan, for example,
Yeah.
doesn't mean you can't read about Japan, about the history of Japan. I mean, Japan is a phenomenal country. I haven't been there, but this is based on, once again, as you said, what I've read.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so much to learn. There's I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I read that in Japan, when they build their businesses, because there are so many successful global businesses and brands that have lasted over decades. And that's because they always think long term. They're like building for 200 years from now.
Hmm.
Is that
I think that is true. It's kind of built into the culture. Same in China. They play, as they say, the long game.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and one of the other problems I think today is that everything is kind of instant. So it's instant food, it's instant whatever, and culturally, what it means is even say music that is today very popular. So people forget about it and they just move on to the next thing. And what's and corporations love to sell that kind of thing, but there is parts of culture that I think should actually last. And I think China, Japan, many other countries outside of North America have much more respect for kind of the long term. Is planning what is going to actually stay and be important in the long term, and even financially viable in the long term. So we're very much trapped in North America in a kind of instant gratification society, which doesn't lend itself very well to culture or to democracy. It seems to me. Um, Tell me about South Africa. Is there still a real respect for literature, for reading in South Africa?
You know, it's split. You
Mm,
know, it's split. Like South Africa, I mean, I was born during the apartheid era. So I
yeah.
won't have much to really say about that with regards to experience, like my parents would or grandparents would.
Right.
Um, in '94, I mean, I was at a okay age to understand, what was happening like around me. And then,
Hmm.
as I started to get older, I was also fascinated with politics, believe it or not. I was privileged enough to visit Robben Island to, see where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned, for
Right.
so many years. I went on a tour, got educated about that. And then as I got older, then I started to also, read, different books, from the different, what do we call them? I'm going to say politicians. There's another word.
Mm.
Um, it's like the tip of my tongue, what we would call them. Okay, I can't think about it
Yeah.
now. But it was a word that was used, to really, define who Nelson Mandela was, or what Tambo was, and so on. So that gave me that foundation of the history of South Africa. And then I started to connect the dots for myself. And then, I witnessed, 98 election, then, uh, yeah, that was Mbeki. And then it was
Mhm.
2 terms of Mbeki. Then it was Jacob Zuma. And now we got Cyril Ramaphosa. And when I look at it from an outside view, because I'm not too into politics now, and for me, I feel like, it's all just one show, on
Mhm.
this global stage. And, once again, this is just my opinion on the matter. And I feel no matter what disputes, different presidents from different countries will have with each other, I feel like it's WWE.
Mhm.
Like on the surface, they're disputing with each other, but I feel behind the scenes, there's another agenda that's going on. When I start to connect the dots, and with this
Yeah.
whole agenda for 2030 and how we will move, to a cashless system and, central bank digital currencies and all these things that are happening along the way. But back to South Africa. When I look at South Africa, I also just see like, fun and games. It's become so divided. I mean, like majority of nations out there now. We have so
Yeah.
many political parties. You got the ANC, you got the DA, you got the EFF, you got the IFP. I think there's like 20 political parties now,
Mhm.
and compared to the states now, where you got the Republicans and you got the Democrats, right? Those are your two major parties now. One of the two is always going to win. None of the other independents or smaller parties. But in South Africa, you have like the top five, they have like equal share, in the
Mhm.
country. Now we have
Right.
this government of unity, that's going on. Also, like another show for me, clown
Mhm.
show for me, if you ask me.
Mhm.
So it's so divided in that way. And if the politician can't come to common ground, how are the people supposed to come to common ground? And once again, I'm going to mention emotions again. We're driven by emotions, you
Mhm.
know? If you go to the streets of South Africa, like your lower class societies, your rural areas, I mean, South Africa, we call them the townships. If you go
Right.
there, you know, they're just fighting with each other all the time. And then
Yeah.
I sit back and observe, right? And I will chat, because I have a few friends that are from these areas, and I will query, I will ask, like, you telling me that everyone in this community is fighting with each other because of their own political views. Oh no, I'm with this ideology, I'm with that ideology, but they're from the same area and they're struggling the same. There's no water, there's no electricity, there's no decent schools for their kids, but you're fighting with each other over a political party,
Yeah,
you know?
and that's where political parties really divide again. I think a lot of it has to do with power. I'm a great believer, actually, that real democracy means from the bottom up, and so the people themselves need to sit down and say, what is really important here? Forget for the moment ideologies. Where what do we actually need here? And again, as you said, good schools, good water around the world. Almost everybody wants basically the same thing. We want power that works. We want roads that are paved. We want schools that work, healthcare systems that work. And parties can unite us, but a lot of times they divide us a lot. And we see that actually in the States, but we see it here in Canada as well. So, but people need to demand from their parties what they want, and not let parties just be their own little thing. Power operations or something. Um, yeah, I'm thinking back though, as you were saying about Nelson Mandela, who as I've got older and the more what a 21st century, 20th century world icon. When I was a kid growing up, I have to say my greatest hero was actually Muhammad Ali, and as a hero around the world, actually. And in fact, when I was younger, I would work out. I would shadow box for about an hour on end. I'd work up quite the sweat, and I would copy his alley shuffle, and it was great training. I'd be useless in the ring. I would not be able to beat anybody. But just sheerly the work of copying his moves and listening to what he had to say on everything was just what a great character. So a few heroes I have over the years. So Mandela's kind of up there.
Yeah. I mean, he had a great idea. He had a vision for South Africa. But then when I look, let me explain it this way. It's like the good that came out of it was freedom for all. I don't know how much freedom there is in democracy anyway,
Mhm.
right? But it also came with a huge mess.
Mhm.
So, him leading the ANC at the time, managed to build but could not sustain.
Mhm.
You see, they could not sustain. And I honestly don't know where it's all going. I
Yeah.
honestly don't know where it's all going. You know, there's been so many key moments, since 94 that I feel could have really put South Africa on the map as a first world country, but it hasn't. And then you ask yourself, why?
Mhm.
I look at South Africa in 2010, and I mean, I was in my 20s at that time, hosting the FIFA World Cup. All these beautiful stadiums were built. We had the whole international community, in South Africa. I saw that as an opportunity to grow from there.
Mhm.
All that's being built, the infrastructure,
Yeah.
the publicity. What happened? Not even 2 years after the FIFA World Cup, decline.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
decline. And then I'm like,
You know, Yeah, what you've described here, and to fall back on my academic background, you've described actually perfectly the what happens in so many countries, places over time is quite often you have charismatic leaders. You can think of Muhammad, think of Christ, whatever, who have a vision of where we want to go, But after they pass away, then you need somebody, maybe a bureaucracy or people who actually come along to figure out again those things like, how do we fix the roads? How do we have healthcare, education, the nuts and bolts of things? And so there's always a difference between this kind of charismatic leader on the one hand who has this broad vision of where society should go. And then there's the kind of technicians who have to come along and actually make things work. Right? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, sometimes in every place you have bad technicians.
Yeah. Like, there's always bad technicians. You know?
And technicians who are in it only for themselves because all they really want is a car that drives by and makes a lot of noise.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. You know? So, for me, like, I've just stepped away, as I mentioned, from the whole political scene. I don't pay too much attention to it. I keep my eye on what's happening, especially with what's going on in the States at the moment.
Mm.
Um, but, I don't get clinged onto it where it's, dictating me emotionally how to go about my life. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's anything I can say, to anyone out there that really wants to build something that they are truly passionate about, you have to do it by yourself, like your own steam. You know, I'm not saying go out there and do something that's going to put you in prison now. I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
go out there and be a criminal. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that the laws in all these countries make
Mm-hmm.
sense. I'm not saying that as well, right? The laws don't have to define what type of person you need to be in society. You can be a good person, but
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean you have to agree with the laws or agree with the government and all the processes that go on, right? But if you really want to build something for yourself and build a legacy for your family, you need to do it by yourself. Because what I see on the streets of South Africa is that millions of people are still so dependent on the government to give them a decent education, to give them a job, to give them a house, to give them clean water, to give them clean energy, electricity. And now it's not
Mm-hmm.
happening. So what happens is they just stay where they are, stagnant. They don't move forward. They don't progress in their life, and it just continues generation by generation by generation. Where the mindset cannot be changed. Like, I can't go there and tell them, "Hey, no, you can't do this. It's 2025. What do you want to learn? You can learn it online now. You don't need to go to a fancy university. The information is online. Self-educate yourself. Build a foundation for whatever it is you want to do, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is you want to. Even if you want to be a doctor, you graduated with good grades, cool, but you can't afford yet, to go to university to become a doctor. But I mean, you can get the foundation sorted out, get the foundation sorted out. We're living in this digital era, but it's so hard, and this is from experience, to convince people to think that way. They don't want to because of that generational curse.
It's true that you can become too reliant on governments or too reliant on private corporations or something. I do think there's a certain value of working with other people. It is very hard in a lot of places for lone individuals to do it, despite what we can find online nowadays. But I think the thing is, for again, as I said, I'm a great believer uh, in grassroots democracy. And so people getting together, almost no change has ever come about just solely by an individual. It really does come about through groups of people who push for something. And so if the government doesn't work for you, push to get the government that will work for you. It doesn't mean you have to be dependent on the government, but the government should actually represent you, not be some
Yeah.
foreign body outside of you, right? Kind of like it's like you get rid of some colonial power and then you create your own colonial power that is still governing you, right? So you need to move beyond that. Uh, but I'm all for people actually using some of the new media to educate themselves. It is helpful, and as you said, to To not give into emotion, though, I do think, we are thinking people. Human beings are thinking creatures, and it's only through thinking that we're actually going to be able to create a better world, a better South Africa, a better Canada, a better United
Yeah,
States.
yeah. No, 100%, 100%. This was a refreshing conversation, about politics, and I don't think, any of us can, really tell, what's going to happen in the next year, what's going to happen in the next 5 years. There's a lot of change that's coming, in the world. There's a lot of
Yeah.
changes coming. So hence why, like, I emphasize, just like try to stay emotionally detached, you know, focus on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, be aware you don't have to turn yourself to stone, but you can give in to just rabid emotions, which a lot of people do. So, but you're right. If you think back what the world looked like even 10 years ago, who could have predicted the world we have right now, even 5 years ago? So, things that to live in the 21st century is to get used to the fact that change is always happening more than
Mm,
we ever knew before. You know.
mm. And we need to adapt to it. That's true intelligence,
Yeah.
adapt to change.
Yeah.
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 So,
Don't be afraid of it. Don't get angry about it. Just understand it as much as possible, and then do what you can to direct the change that you want.
yeah, embrace it, look for the blessings in the skies, in the
Mhm.
skies. That I learned when I did a short course on Winston Churchill.
Oh
And,
yes.
he mentioned during, World War II, to look for the blessings in the skies. And this also came post World War II when, they removed him from power, they removed him
Yeah.
from parliament, right? And you also looked at that as a blessing in disguise, even though he didn't agree with the decision, but gave him a chance to write his memoir like you did, you
Yeah.
know? And it was
Yeah.
because of his memoirs, that prevented so many world wars after.
Mm.
You see,
Yeah. I
so
when I was younger, actually, we had several of the volumes of his history of the Second World War, but also he had a histories of the English-speaking peoples, big multi-volume thing. So I remember, yeah, combing through those and with some fascination. I mean, there are many parts with which I would disagree with Winston Churchill today, were he alive. We'd have a great conversation. Maybe you could have him on a podcast if he was alive. But but an interesting individual. Of course, he had connections also with South Africa because he was there during the Boer War, and he wrote about that as a young man, also in the British military. So a fascinating life for sure.
yeah, yeah. I mean, all when I look at history, we got Winston Churchill, right, on one side of it. Like in school, in high school, we studied Hitler, and Nazi Germany. And look, I don't condone, all the mass killings, that Hitler did, and Nazi Germany did. But while I was studying Hitler in school, and I mean, I read a couple books, everyone has a different opinion, right? You know, so I read a couple books, along the way. And I should sit and I should think to myself, yeah, he did all this wrong, but I try to put myself in the shoes of the Germans during that time. I would have also been like, yeah, yeah, what a guy, what a leader, you know.
Yeah,
I put
I
myself
think
in
that.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting and very sociological way to think of it again. I mean, Hitler was a psychopath, and he was a terrible human being, and and he's through his charisma, he was able to set off a world war with millions and millions of people dead, and the outcome of that was, of course, we end up with the Cold War for the next number of years. But my the way I've always approached people like Hitler is that to understand him, he didn't just do this himself. you have to understand the context of the time, the Great Depression, coming out of the First World War. People are desperate, they're afraid, they're angry. And so the way to understand how somebody like Adolf Hitler could be created, or even today to think about why is there Donald Trump? There's no point in just focusing on Donald Trump. You have to understand what's gone on in the United States for the last 30 years or so, the Iraq War, depressions, the recessions, etc. So that's the only way to do it. And back to what I was saying before about mass movements, Hitler was a kind of a focal point for a lot of that anger and everything. But what you have to understand here is there's a mass movement of a lot of people who got together. There were also a lot of economic interests. The people who actually ran the German economy were frankly afraid of the workers, the common people, the workers there. They were afraid the communism was everywhere. And they threw their support financially and otherwise behind Adolf Hitler. If they hadn't done that, Adolf Hitler would have remained a very bad painter and never amounted to anything. But it was really a lot of other power dynamics and people getting together and motivating the German public who are terrified, afraid, angry, etc. And we had Nazi movements in the United States. We had them in Canada. We had them in France. There were similar movements of people who were scared by politicians during that time and ended up with a very bad outcome as a result. So Hitler does history doesn't repeat itself, but it is worthwhile reading to see where there's kind of general things going on even today.
Yeah, yeah. No, 100%. I mean, yeah, as I said, like I'm like unbiased when I like study these, political figures like back in history. And I think to myself, okay, what was their magic? You've explained it. Once again, tapping into emotions, right? Tapping
Mm-hmm.
into emotions. And that's how we get this right. And then you look at, okay, how they built their way up and how they got to power. And then I would sit there and I would think, wow, this actually happened, in that
Mm-hmm.
manner, you know, post World War One, Germany's in this state. Here comes this guy. And as you said, he is telling the people, what they are feeling.
Yeah.
He's verbal about it. He's loud
Yeah.
about it. Everyone else is just like keeping quiet, keeping it inside. He comes out and he's like, this is what we are going to do. You
Yeah.
know?
He's channeling those fears and he's saying, listen, I know you're unhappy and I'm going to show you a way out of this. It ends up being a very bad way out of it, but he's able to convince them through his rhetoric and his persona to follow him. And he's not the only leader in history that we've seen do this. Again, Mussolini, Franco in Spain, Napoleon. On and on, we see these kind of lone figures who are able to motivate through fear and anger to lead us in the wrong direction, but we have to understand it.
Yeah. But I mean, when we compare, all those years ago versus 2025, um, I feel like, we are much more awakened. There's more resources available to us where we can get different opinions, where it's not just one person, speaking their truth. Now we can jump onto Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and we can have so many options on the table of who to listen to. Those days it wasn't available, you know.
Yeah, that's true. Although if I was still teaching today, I would emphasize with students to be a critical thinker, and when you listen to something, actually critically think about what that person is saying. What's the evidence for what they're saying? Does it stand up to, again, a lot of podcasts, a lot of YouTube videos are pretty emotionally based. It's kind of visuals that really appeal to people. And so we have more information, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have the means of actually understanding or putting the information together in a kind of rational way. So again, it falls on all of us to be really aware of what is the information that is coming to us. Hopefully, podcasts like your own are a good way for people to think about things in a broader and more critical kind of fashion.
Yeah, we have to know what's modern day propaganda.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Trevor, you mind holding up your book for us? Now we
Oh
can get to the
goodness.
book.
They and Ed is going to be very pleased with this. There it is. Tales
Here
this
we
side
go.
of the Elysian Fields, and it's one of the nice things about the book is it's a series of different chapters. You can can read one chapter, put it down, come back to it a week later if you like, read a different chapter. The chapters are all kind of standalone. People who actually number of people have said how much they are carried back to their own time traveling and working at jobs. I have a whole section about working in really bad jobs, but they were kind of fun because we've all worked in bad jobs, let's face it.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and so everybody who's read it, they've really enjoyed it. It's kind of a nice light read, and they got something out of it. Traveling to different places or just growing up, the experiences of growing up, as all of us eventually do.
Yeah, yeah. So give like without giving too much away, you know, from start to finish of the book, just a brief run through. Like, where does it start? What can people expect in the middle? Where does it end?
Yeah, where it starts is actually a brief sort of, without being a full biography, I tell about myself growing up and how I became a writer. I mentioned before as a teenager, kind of writing short stories, poetry, and how I early on decided I wanted to be a writer. Goes on from there to talk about, again, some early jobs I have. It talks about one trip to the United States at a time when the Vietnam War was actually still hot and heavy, and hitchhiking down there and with almost no money and living on a beach in San Diego for a month. It then takes you around to traveling through Europe and the Canary Islands and being in Greece again, sleeping on a beach in Mykonos for a month. And then takes you back to working at different jobs, hitchhiking across parts of the United States, and finally, some trips up to northern India to a place called Ladakh, which very few people were traveling to at that time. And my experiences being in this place very close to the Tibetan border. Uh, so I found it really interesting to capture again my own experiences, and as said, many people have read it, have found it an interesting read of travels and experiences from the age of about 18 to the age of 30. um, and yeah, so I hope people will pick it up and see for themselves what they think, and it'll probably for many people bring back recollections of their own life, whether you've been to places like Japan or Europe or whatever. I think it'll resonate with a lot of people.
And given like your sociology background in history, I think you have like, sort of answered this question at the start of the show. It fits into your journey. You analyze like each place. Yes, you do. I remember you mentioning that you analyze each place as you move along, linking it back to sociology.
Yeah, it's kind of my way of looking at the world through my own experiences, but also in a broader context of that sociology provides that kind of context. It is all of us are on a journey. This is our journey through life and the experiences, the people we meet, the things we do. Interesting enough, I said I have a book coming out very shortly here. It's called Sepharname, and maybe we can do an interview after that comes out. We can talk about that book. Well, Sepharname actually is a Farsi word meaning journey. And so
Huh.
literally the book is about traveling through the Middle East in 76, 77, before the Iranian Revolution, just before, and before Afghanistan blew up. So it's literally a travel across those places to India, overland, but it's also part of my journey as a person living this life and how it kind of impacted me. So we all have a journey, whether the journey takes you out of Johannesburg or takes you to other places. These are all the journeys that we live, and so I hope we can meet again, Kino, and talk about my ongoing journey as a writer.
Definitely, definitely. All you have to do, to answer that question is just reach out to Mickey, and Mickey will let me know.
I
And we
know
can take
Mickey will do
it.
it.
Yeah. You know, when I listen to you, Trevor, like I'm like there's so many times, I want to get out, because I feel like my environment here in Johannesburg is just too toxic for me and what I want to accomplish in my life and what my goals are, you know. But it can become so difficult at times,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Do you think it's more difficult now to make such a move for one's life than it was 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah, I don't want to minimize how difficult it is for some people, either the politics, culture, just the finances of getting out. So I appreciate that. And I view actually my own life as very privileged to be able to do some of these things, although I still actually very much travel on the cheap. For one thing, I really hate resorts and I feel uncomfortable in a really expensive hotels. So, and it's not just because I'm cheap. I just don't feel comfortable being in a really expensive hotel. So there's that issue, but I think we've talked about fear a lot here, and I think that people are increasingly afraid to go places because of the images they have of other places. They're afraid that it is too difficult or it'll be a problem. And one of the things I've encouraged young people or older people to do is dare to go outside, dare to take what you think is a risk to go someplace because you'll find it invigorating, you'll find it life changing. The experiences you have, good, bad, or indifferent, because travel isn't always just a pot of joy, but it will change you, and it's well worthwhile taking that risk to go someplace outside of your own experience, because it will broaden you and it will make you think about your own life and the experiences you've already had. It will make you think about those things very differently when you dare to do that. And it's for that reason I still really enjoy traveling, because I not only discover things about other places when I travel, I discover new things about myself as I travel. Things I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about before, and so it's I think a valuable thing, and it has the potential to connect all of us better in a world that increasingly sometimes is divided.
Yeah. I agree with you. There's a lot of people out there where it's fear, you know.
Yeah.
But my situation, just being completely open and transparent with you, is I don't fear moving or relocating to another country, experiencing different cultures. I don't, you know. I love to live on that edge, but I also want to be in a place where it complements, my career and what I'm doing with my life. Now,
Yep.
this is an example I'm going to use with you. Real life happened in 2025 with me. So now I'm a podcaster. I'm labeled a
Yep.
media personality, right? Earlier this year, I was invited for an event in Los Angeles. Now, I haven't been to the States before. I've never been to the
Mhm.
States before. And I never had a reason to go to the States. And I always told myself that if I'm going to go to a country, it must complement my work. It must be because of my work that I got invited. And then it happened, right? It happened. So I get invited to this event in Los Angeles. It was early this year, the short notice. So, I had to run around, I had to get an agent to handle the whole visa application for me. So anyway, now I'm in Johannesburg. I had to go to Durban for the interview because I couldn't get a slot in time in Johannesburg. So anyway, I go to Durban. That's who I am. Like when there's an opportunity like this, I just go.
Yep.
So
Yep.
anyway, boom, I'm gone. I got a date. Cool time. Rock up. All done. All set. My agent was like, there's no way this can go wrong for you. It's all there. Plus, I had an official invite letter. So anyway, I rock up at the embassy and, got this guy there at the embassy. He's busy checking, he's checking. And he's only asking me questions related to my podcast, right? So, he asked me a few questions about the podcast. He goes back. I don't know what he's checking on the PC, honestly speaking,
Yeah.
but he's checking something, And, the US is like, I'm not sure about Canada, but it's like not many countries ask you for your social media platforms, But anyways,
That's actually a very new thing in the States, and it's during the Trump era. They
yeah,
are so I'll tell you, a lot of Canadians are reluctant to travel the States right now because border guards may actually want to look at your cell phone. They may want to see what you actually have on there, and if you said anything controversial. So it's unfortunate for you that this happened during the Trump era, because that seems to be a very common thing with border security now that would not have happened before. And it wouldn't happen in Canada, and it wouldn't happen traveling through Europe. So very unfortunate for you.
yeah, that's it, So the guy was just, focusing on the podcast. And then he tells me after like waiting there like 15 minutes, I mean, this is a quick in and out, He tells me it's been rejected because you're a media personality,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, okay, we have a bit of, can you hear me?
Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
can hear you.
you're back. I'll just
Yeah, we just froze for a
cut out.
moment.
So he tells me, no, because you're a media personality, you've applied for the wrong visa. I'm like, doesn't make sense. So anyway, I leave there. I'm gonna say, cool. I call the agent. I'm like, this is what they told me. The agent's like, what? It's the correct visa. Everything is correct. There is no specific visa for a media personality. And then we started to put our heads together, on why this got rejected. And the thing is, I have a network in the US. I've had many guests in the US come on. As you can see, I'm unbiased. I allow anyone to share their opinion. You know, when someone says something, I'm not like, I don't believe that. No, you're wrong. I'm not that type of person. This is a
Mhm.
platform where you can come on and you can speak your truth, and
Yep.
I am going to entertain it and I am going to have this conversation with you, because I got no views on anything, right?
Mhm.
So if anything, you are educating me about what this are things, and then I get educated about what this are things, you know. I've had Democratic supporters come on the show. I've had Republican supporters come on the show. Political authors from both sides come on the show, you know? So, I'm open. So our feeling was, they checked this out somewhere, somehow. And one of the questions he did ask me at the embassy was, will I be interviewing people at the event? And I'm like, yeah, that's why I've been invited there, you know? Oh, they don't want that happening, you know?
Yeah.
So
Well,
I end up where and what do I do now? You know,
yeah.
what
So you, so,
what
so Yeah, so you weren't able to get in there. I have to tell you that, I know for a fact that if I were traveling the States, and I would not now, but if I was traveling there, I probably also would be rejected, because it would be very easy to look up my profile and things, broadcasts I've done, lots of recordings. They could look up things I've written. I wouldn't be allowed into the United States. So we share something in common. Uh,
Yay.
but but hopefully you get though invited to other places, because but it is interesting, of course, being a podcaster. In theory, you could do podcasts from any number of places.
Yep.
That's the new media, right? And even if you were there for a few days or a week or something, you could do broadcasts from Athens or Barcelona or Cairo or wherever, um, and Yeah. So good luck with that. I hope you get that experience to do it again, but it won't happen during the Trump era. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah. Now I'm just playing it by ear, and I trust God knows what's next, and everything does happen for a reason. So
Yep.
let's see. Let's see. So,
Exactly.
Trevor, where can listeners find you online?
Yeah, they can, if they like, they can just send me an email at my email address, trevor.harrison at, I'll spell it out, ULETH. That's actually short for University Lethbridge, .ca for Canada. So trevor.harrison at uleth.ca. They can get hold of me. They can also get hold of me. I'm easy enough to find on my Facebook account. And I will be sharing this podcast. Happy to do that with my followers, and hopefully many hundreds of thousands more people will be following you. And so I really am not that hard to track down. People, if they punch in my name, you'll probably find lots of stuff that I've done in the past, which is again what American security probably does too.
100%. For the listeners, the key links will be available in the description. Wow, Trevor, we could probably go on with this conversation for hours. That's the thing about the world, politics, society, culture, and religion.
Well, we haven't even begun to talk about music and everything, and a whole bunch of. So this has been wonderful. Let's think of this as being kind of an introduction.
Yes.
It's like we've begun dating. This was our first date, and we can come back and have future dates, and it would be great to see you again, Kino. So
Same here.
it's been lots of fun.
Yeah, same here. This is what I love to do. I love to build, that long-term relationships, Like I don't see anyone that comes on as just a guest, and that's it, finished. For building relationships.
Indeed, we need to do that
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Okay, Trevor, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I wish you all the best with your book and the upcoming book. And we'll definitely chat about that, the next time we meet.
For sure. Sounds
All
good.
right.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye.